Every year, on the Sunday closest to the anniversary of the liberation of Auschwitz-Birkenau death camp, January the 27th, 1945, we solemnly mark Holocaust Memorial Day here in Dublin. I now invite the President of Ireland, Michael D. Higgins, to address us.
The Holocaust is a huge stain on European history, one that shows us the true evil that can emerge from hatred, prejudice, and intolerance, the terrible inhumanity that can arise, and how an ideology can emerge that threatens the order of humanity itself. The Holocaust shows us the horrific consequences that unfold when genocide is unleashed and allowed to become state policy. The anti-Semitism that was not condemned, that was tolerated, even encouraged, should always be remembered as the shameful prelude it constituted. It shows us the dangers of looking the other way, of denial, or of simply not wanting to know.
We must prevent future generations from thinking of the Holocaust in terms of anonymous, faceless numbers. Each of these Jewish victims has a name. The names of people who perished in the Holocaust that we will now read are cherished family members of people living in Ireland.
Max Heller, Clara Heller, Gisela Molnar, Sarah Urbach, Heel Urbach, Shimon Urbach,
Salomon Delmont, Caroline Wolf, Martin Wolf,
Adela Fried, Bella Fried, Katerina Fried,
Marta Elbert, Ephraim Neyman, Zvi Neyman,
Neyman children, Menachem Neyman, Mrs. Neyman,
Hertz Hoffman, Haya Hoffman, Meir Hoffman, Devorah Shmaevich, Miriam Pollock, Yura Mataya, Ifasha Mataya, Shavtai Sustiel, Luci Sustiel, Moshe Yom Tov Sustiel.
I was incarcerated in Bergen-Belsen concentration camp along with my mother, grandmother, aunt, brother, and cousin from November 1944 until the liberation of the camp in 1945. What I witnessed as a 9-year-old boy is impossible to describe. The cruelty of the camp guards, the hunger, cold and disease. People were dying in their thousands, their emaciated bodies left where they fell or thrown into heaps. 70,000 prisoners of Bergen-Belsen are buried there in mass grave. I lost 35 members of my family in the Holocaust. I am here today not because of who I am, but because what I am. I am a Jew, and I am a survivor of the Holocaust.
The children of Holocaust survivors, myself included, are called second generation. I now invite Riva Neumann, who lost several family members in the Holocaust and whose parents survived Auschwitz, to give her reading.
We, like many of our friends, were used to the reality of very small families. No grandparents, no uncles, no aunts. We didn't realize till much later in life that we were all born with the title second generation, a title that brings with it a vast responsibility to our parents and now to everyone, to keep on telling their story, learn the lessons, and never forget.
It is traditional at Holocaust memorial events to light 6 candles in memory of the 6 million Jewish victims of the Shoah. In Dublin, we also light candles for other victims of the Nazis. The first candles are dedicated to the memory of people with disabilities and disabling conditions who were murdered, starved to death, and forcibly sterilized by doctors and other willing helpers. We will always remember. The next candles are to honor the memory of millions of Poles and Slavs who were murdered, displaced, and forcibly Aryanized by the Nazis, and the members of ethnic minorities who were persecuted and murdered and sterilized. We will always remember. The next candles are to honor the memory of the Romani people of Europe who were rounded up, murdered, displaced, and forcibly sterilized by the Nazis. We will always remember. The next candles are to honor the memory of homosexual men and women who were persecuted and murdered because of their sexual orientation. We will always remember. The final 6 candles that we light this evening are dedicated to the memory of the 6 million Jews, including 1.5 million infants and children who were exterminated by the Nazis and their collaborators. All our candle lighters are children or grandchildren of Holocaust survivors, 2nd and 3rd generation. All of them lost countless members of their families in the Holocaust. I call upon the following to light their candles: Joe Katz, whose mother Frieda survived Auschwitz; Charlotte Kaplan, whose father Raphael Orbach survived Buchenwald and Theresienstadt; David Phillips, whose father Jeffrey escaped to England on the Kinder transports; Siobhan Zinn Collis, whose father Zoltan survived Bergen-Belsen concentration camp;
Our generation and the generation or two after us will be the last that will be able to say that we stood and shook the hands of some of those who survived. Go home from this place and tell your children and your grandchildren and your great-grandchildren that today in Listowel you looked into eyes that witnessed the most cataclysmic events ever unleashed by mankind upon mankind. Tell them that you met people who will still be remembered and still talked about and still wept over 10,000 years from now. Because if they are not, there will be no hope for us at all. The Holocaust happened, and it can happen again. And every one of us, if only out of our own sense of self-preservation, has a solemn duty to ensure that nothing like it ever occurs again.